Hello everyone, welcome to part 1 of ManageEngine OpManager's free training series. I hope you can hear me and see the presentation clearly. Kindly confirm the same via our chat window. Let's start once we get a few confirmations. Thank you. The goal of this training session is to simplify network monitoring and help you utilize OpManager in the best way possible. I hope this objective gets met by the end of this session. I would also like to point out that there are a group of panelists with us today. Feel free to raise your queries via the chat panel, and they will be happy to answer all the questions right away. Before we move ahead with the presentation, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Hadwin Sachit Lewis, working with ManageEngine OpManager for more than a year now. And today, I'll help you take a simple approach to network discovery. I am glad to meet you all in this training session. Here is the training schedule for this season. This season's Op Manager free training series is divided into 4 parts. We are on 11th April, and we will be diving deep into network discovery today. On the 18th of April, we will talk about network monitoring in depth, and on the third week, that is the 25th of April, we will talk about alerts, reports, and network mapping in Op Manager. And on May 2nd, we will wrap up this season by discussing the various add-ons and integrations in Op Manager. Also, I would like to let you know that the training session is happening in 2 time zones. One is 6 a.m. GMT and the other is 11 a.m. EDT. So depending on your convenience, you can attend either of these sessions. We would also like to let you know that the recorded version of this webinar, along with the presentation material, will be shared with you via email by tomorrow. So let's dive into network discovery without any further ado. This is the agenda for today's session. This is how your entire session will be split. First, we will start with user management, where we'll talk about the various user roles and modes of authentication in Op Manager. Next, we will also talk about network discovery and the various discovery methods in Op Manager. Also, we will see in depth on how to discover your virtual environment, interfaces, storage devices, and every other component in your network separately. We will also talk about 2 significant features that will make your entire discovery process smart. Before we move ahead, one of the most common questions that we receive is, will Op Manager be able to monitor a particular device that I use in my organization every day? Say I run a hospital. Will Op Manager be able to monitor all my server machines, or I own a power plant? Will Op Manager be able to monitor all the temperature sensors in it? I would like to answer this question before anything else. Yes. Yes, Op Manager can monitor any device, provided the device is able to connect to a network through an IP address. That being said, I would like to begin with user management right away. After installing Op Manager and before beginning to discover the devices in your organization, the first step is to give user access privileges to members in your organization so that the assigned individuals can take up their responsibilities and monitor the allotted devices effectively. The user management feature in Op Manager helps you to do exactly that by enabling you to create individual user profiles for each member in your organization. It is understood that not every user in your organization needs access to the entire network. Depending on the devices they monitor, you can either grant or restrict privileges to the users in your organization. Now, if you look at the Op Manager, we have 3 user roles. The first one is the administrator user, the next one is the operator, and the third one is a custom user. The administrator user has unrestricted access to perform all kinds of operations in Manager. This includes performing all operations such as adding or removing devices, troubleshooting issues, and changing configurations. Perhaps this role is usually taken up by the senior network engineer who oversees the entire network from a network operations center. The next user is the operator, where he or she has only read access, and they can be granted further privileges by the administrator user. And the custom user feature helps you customize user access privileges for each module. You have different modules in Op Manager. So depending upon the need, a user can be granted or restricted privileges. Now let's consider this example. Say there's an organization and the network operations team is headed by Adam. Adam is assisted by a four-man crew consisting of Leonard, Howard, Stuart, and Amy. So Adam will be the administrator, and Leonard, Howard, Stuart, and Amy will be operators or the custom users depending upon their job role. Now let's look to the product and see how to create these user roles. So let's click on settings. And now let's click on user management. So as per our example, let's say Adam wants a dedicated person to take care of the dashboard and report section only. So he decides to put up Leonard for the task. Let's see how Adam creates a custom user role for Leonard. First, he needs to create a user role. So let's click on add role. By defining the user role first and then creating the user profile, OpManager helps you create a default set of user roles that can later be mapped to the respective individuals so that network admins do not need to define the user role every single time they create a user profile. So let's create the role now. I'm going to add a visualization user. So since we are giving him a visualization access, I'm going to give him full access over dashboards and reports. So now we click on save. Now we've successfully created a user role for Leonard. So since Leonard is going to be a visualization user, let us now see how to create his user profile using the user role we just created. So let's click on users. Let's click on add users. So now let's select the role for Leonard, which is the visualization user. And now before I move on, let me talk about the different types of authentication that Op Manager provides. You can either add users using logical authentication, Darius authentication, or AD authentication. So let's move on and add the username, create an email ID, the password. Now we click on next. So you can either give access to all devices in your network, or you can group devices using the business views feature. Since we want Leonard to be able to visualize reports and from all devices in the network, let's go with all devices. And now we click on save. And we've successfully created a user role for Leonard. The scope of creating a user profile is to give rights to users to access modules and devices in a network. Creating user profiles helps you have increased control over the user in an organization over who accesses what. And speaking about increased control in your organization, let's take a brief look at OpManager's password policy. OpManager's password policy is used to encourage the user to set a tough password. This will prevent password guessing and make your account less vulnerable to security threats. This password policy lets you set custom rules to guide your user to create a strong password. Usually, network administrators, when creating user profiles, set simple passwords like admin at 123 to all the profiles. But with password policy, the administrator can define factors like how long your password should be or enforce password history, thus encouraging the user to set a strong password. Now, let's go back to the presentation and continue. Now, let's look at the types of security authentication OpManager has. So when we looked at user management, we looked about how there is a need to have increased control over access to OpManager. And authentic security authentication in OpManager helps with exactly that. So OpManager provides two types of authentication. One is two-factor authentication, and the other is SAML authentication. These two methods ensure that only credible users log into Op Manager. Now let's go to the UI and look at how to set up authentication. So under settings, let's click on authentication. So let's click on two-factor authentication first. So to enable two-factor authentication, all you have to do is click on this checkbox. And now you have two authentication modes. So one is the authenticate through authenticator apps, and the second is through email. Now both involve a timed OTP. And authenticator apps make use of apps like Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, and Zoho's very own OneAuth Authenticator. And in the case that you choose an email, a timed OTP will be sent to your chosen email address. And in case you know that you have a trusted browser, by entering the number of days you want your browser to be trusted for, you can avoid having to log into your browser repeatedly. So let's move on to the next type of authentication, which is SAML authentication. Now, this stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. This type of authentication involves two components. One is the service provider, and the other one is an identity provider. In our case, Auth Manager is the service provider, and the identity provider is an external application that is used to verify the credentials of the user to allow a login. You can use any type of identity providers, such as Okta, Azure, JumCloud, and OneLogin. So all you have to do is either configure your IDP information manually by providing the IDP name, your login and logout URL, and the IDP certificate, or you can choose to upload the IDP metadata file. So based so now we have learned to create user profiles and secure them. The next step is to set up credentials. So let's take a look at what credentials are in the presentation. Before discovering the devices in your environment, you need to add credentials in Op Manager based on the devices you need to monitor. Credentials are required to access a device for monitoring, and for this reason, Op Manager is truly an agentless network monitoring software. That is, it does not require an agent to be installed in the devices for which you need to monitor. Op Manager supports different types of credentials like SNMP, WMI for Windows devices, Telnet or SSH for Linux devices, VMware, Citrix, and Nutanix for virtual devices. Now let's go to the UI and see how to add credentials. Let's click on settings again. So under discovery, excuse me, under discovery, let's click on credentials. So as you can see, there is already a pre-existing library of credentials for your use. And now let's add a new one by clicking on add credential. So I want to add an SNMP v3 credential. So let's enter file name. Let's enter the username. Before selecting the authentication method, we'll talk a little about the SHA-2 protocol to help you understand the next step better. Security is the topmost concern for every organization, and we at ManageEngine take every step to enhance security. And with this objective, we have taken this step to support SHA-2 protocol. OpManager has started supporting SHA-2 protocol for SNMP v3 monitoring. The higher the number of bits, the better the security. Hence, SHA-2 is offered for better security. Authentication method shall be SHA-256, and the encryption method will be AES-256. Let's enter a password. Click on save. And we have successfully added another credential for OpManager. But as you can see, there are multiple credentials for multiple devices. So let's try adding another credential. This time I'm going to add a Windows credential for Windows devices. So let's enter the username, the password. Let's click on save. Now you successfully added a WMI credential for your Windows devices. So now you've seen how to create secure user profiles and add credentials as well. Now all the baby steps are done. So now let's move on to the most awaited part, discovery. So you may be wondering what network discovery means. The term discovery in OpManager refers to the addition of devices or interfaces in OpManager for monitoring. There are different ways of discovering network devices in OpManager. You can either use IP range, subnets, import from Active Directory, or import from CSV file option to discover the devices in your network. Note that all these four ways help you discover devices in bulk. So let's take a look at how to discover devices in the product. So after clicking on settings, this time under discovery again, let's click on network discovery. So as you can see, there has already been a previous discovery completed. So now let's click on new discovery. As you can see, OpManager allows you to discover devices through IP ranges, subnets, through active directories, and from a CSV file. So let's add devices through an IP range this time. So add the IP address here. So now select the credentials you want to be associated with these devices. Now that you selected the credentials, once you click Discover, Auth Manager will discover all the devices within this IP range. But what if you want to ignore certain devices within this IP range, like say your test machines? That is why we need to come back to the smart features I told you about earlier. So let's discuss the first smart feature in Auth Manager. This is the discovery filter. With discovery filters, you can choose to add or ignore devices in a particular run of discovery. So let's go back to the product to see how this works. So to enable discovery filter, just click on the want to ignore devices link. So let's just see how this feature works. Say Adam has given the organization's entire IP range. And like I said previously, he does not want to include his 5 test machines in this particular one. In that case, Adam can choose to ignore the test devices by providing the IP address of the test machines. This, on the other hand, reduces the load on OpManager's server and saves OpManager's licensing too. Once these devices are discovered, you will get the option to approve or ignore devices. As the name suggests, the devices that you approve will be added to OpManager for monitoring, and the devices you ignore will not be considered for future discovery process. The devices that are neither approved nor ignored will be listed under the unapproved devices tab. So let's see how the discovery filter works in the product. So you can choose to discover or ignore devices. You can choose the type of category that you want the device to be ignored with. You can choose the condition. And finally, you enter the IP range. Once you click on add, the discovery tab has been added to this discovery. The discovery filter has been added to this discovery. So once you click on discover, OpManager will avoid those 5 devices while discovering devices within that IP range. So let's go back to the presentation and continue. So as far as we've seen about discovery, we just saw how to discover a bulk range of devices. So now I got you. I hear your question. Does Op Manager have a quick option to add a single device? Yes, Op Manager has two robust features here for your rescue. The first feature is adding a single device to Op Manager using the IP address or the device name. This helps you add a particular device to Op Manager instantly. You can add the device right away and not need to run the bulk discovery process every time. Let me show this in the UI. So under settings and under discovery again, click on add device or server to enter the device name or the IP and select the credential. Click on add device to discover the device right away. So the second feature I had talked about was a discovery scheduler. With this feature, you needn't add each and every device to Auth Manager manually. Instead, you can schedule discovery and see Auth Manager work for you. So let's go back to settings again, and let's click on network discovery once more. So let's click on this clock icon right here. So let's schedule a discovery of devices. I want devices to be discovered monthly on a Sunday at 4 o'clock. So you can choose what happens when devices are rediscovered. You can choose to add and start monitoring, add as unmanaged devices, or not add them at all. And if a device is removed, you can choose to do nothing, delete the device, or unmanage it. You can also enable email notifications to get notified about any changes made in a network via email. So let's go back to the presentation now. And let's look at discovery reports. With discovery reports, you can get valuable insights on the discovery process. So let's go back to our product once more. And now we click on discovery report. Let's consider a scenario now where, say, Adam, our network admin, decides to take a day off and grants access to add devices to the network to another admin. How? Say, if Penny is joining the same day Adam is away, Howard adds Penny's device into the network. To help Adam understand what happened in the network during his absence, all you have to do is check on these reports. And you can also have an even more detailed look using by clicking on reports and then clicking on audit. So let's go back to the presentation. And now let's look at the second smart discovery feature. This is the discovery rule engine. So it is the post-discovery actions that end up eating all your time. And for your rescue, we have the discovery rule engine, which allows you to automate post-discovery actions and reduces the initial configuration time for monitoring the device. So let's go to the product and see how this feature works. So let's go to settings again and click on network discovery once more. And now we click on the discovery rule tab. So let's say you're discovering all the devices in your Hong Kong office and you want to discover all the servers in the office first. Once the servers are discovered, you will have to monitor them for certain services. You will also need to map the servers to a business view to have a comprehensive understanding about your network layout. Conventionally, you will have to discover the device first, then associate it with a monitor. Then you will have to create a business view. However, with Discovery Rule Engine, users can directly cover all the above aspects in a single step. So to add a discovery rule, let's click on Add Rule. Let's enter the name. I'm going to add server rule. So let's create a criteria. I'm going to click on category equals and server. Add. And now I'm going to select actions. I'm going to associate this server with an event log rule. And I'm going to enter a logon failure. And I'm going to add. And now you've successfully added a rule for the server. But remember, with Discovery Rule Engine, you can associate multiple actions with this particular server. So let's associate a notification profile this time. Let's click on Add. And now, if once I click on Save, this event log rule and notification profile will now be associated with any servers that will be added in the future. So let's click on Save. And now the server rule has been saved. But remember when I said that these actions will be associated with servers that will be added in the future. So what about any servers that may already be a part of OpManager's discover monitoring process? All you have to do is click on Run Now, and this will associate the processes with any current servers being monitored by OpManager. So now let's go back to the presentation and continue. So let's move on to interface discovery. Interfaces are the core of any network as they form a bridge between your system and the other interfaces connecting the entire network. Hence, we start with interface monitoring. In OpManager version 12.5.174, a separate option completely dedicated for interface discovery has been added into the product. Using this option, you can define the criteria of the interfaces that are discovered in OpManager. Whenever a device is discovered by OpManager, the device along with its interface will be discovered. But in most of the cases, you might not require all the interfaces associated with the devices to be discovered. On the other hand, discovering all interfaces creates an unnecessary load on OpManager's server. And for the same reason, we have a separate discovery process for interfaces where you can select the list of required interfaces and add them for discovery. Now let's see how this works in the product. Let's click on Settings, and under Discovery, click on Interface Discovery. So as you can see, you can add interfaces based on these two criteria. So let's click on Device Criteria, Category, and this equals Router. Let's click on Add. So you can choose to match any of the following or all of the following. And now let's go with interface criteria. So I'm going to select interface speed and enter. Click on Add. So now OpManager will discover interfaces with interface speed over 100 Mbps. Once you click on Discover, and all these discovered interfaces will be listed under the Inventory tab. So let's go back to the presentation and continue. Now let's move on to virtualization discovery. So let's talk about OpManager's capabilities in discovering virtual devices. Thanks to OpManager's virtualization discovery, you can discover your virtual networks. OpManager supports various vendors such as VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix, and Xen servers. Let's see the rest in the UI. Let's click on Settings. And under Discovery again, let's click on Virtualization Discovery. So as you can see, OpManager has the option to discover VMware devices, Hyper-V, Xen, and Nutanix devices, like I previously said. You also have the option to discover vCenters or ESX hosts separately. So let's enter the IP address for the virtualization for the VMware vCenter device. Now we enter the credential for the VMware device. And once we click on Discover, the vCenter device will be added to OpManager's discovery process. So let's see how virtual devices look in OpManager. So once you click on the device, you can see the snapshot page. You can see how many virtual machines are available in this vCenter and the number of data stores as well. So now let's go back to the presentation. Now, before we move on to the next slide, let's say we know that John is new to the organization. Adam assigns a task to keep the devices on the first floor readily discovered for an important monitoring task. Now, John has the IP address of only the core routers. Let's see what feature in OpManager can help John. Yes, it is indeed layer 2 discovery. Layer 2 discovery is a very useful feature in OpManager as it allows you to discover the second layer of devices that are connected to a main device. For example, say you have a core router and there are multiple devices associated with it. Now, with layer 2 discovery, you just have to provide the IP address of the core router and automatically all associated devices are discovered. You can also configure device dependency in this. This is an option to regulate the number of alerts raised. Any network monitoring tool will raise alerts for each device that is connected to the seed router when the seed router goes down. But by configuring device dependency, say when a core router with 50 associated devices goes down, Op Manager will raise only one alert, indicating the core router down issue instead of giving 51 alerts saying that all these devices are down. So let's go to the product. So let's click on settings, and under settings, let's click on layer 2 discovery. So let's enter map name. So as you can see, you have multiple discovery mechanisms within Op Manager for discovering routers. So let's enter the IP address. Now let's enter the IP ranges of the device of the dependent routers. So now let's select the credentials for these routers. Set the uplink dependency. So once you click on discover, Op Manager will discover the core routers and all the routers devices associated with that core router. To see how it is represented visually in Op Manager, let's click on Maps and on Layer 2 Maps. Let's click on Layer 2. And here you see the devices associated with the core router. So now let's move back to the presentation. And let's move on to the next slide. So now we're going to be looking at storage discoveries. Data is the heartbeat to any organization. And for that, efficient storage systems serve as the heart. So let's see how to discover storage devices. They form an integral part of any business. An Off Manager also acts as a storage monitoring tool and supports a wide range of devices like RAID, tape libraries, FC switches from leading vendors like Dell, HP, IBM, etc. Op Manager also supports SNMP, CLI, SMI, and API credentials for adding storage devices. So let's see how to add storage devices in the product. So under settings and under discovery again, let's click on add storage device. And as you can see, you have the option to choose between RAID, tape library, or FC switch. So let's select the device model. Select the HPE storage device. Now let's enter the IP range. So once we enter the IP range and enter the storage credential, you can either test the connection to see if the storage device is reachable and click on OK to add the storage device. To see how a storage device looks, let's click on storage and RAID. And now we can see what details are available in the device snapshot page. You have the device summary, you have the disk details, the LUN, the storage info, and the number of monitors associated. So let's go back to the product. Let's go back to the presentation again. And now let's move on to wireless LAN discovery. This is another license module inside OpManager that allows you to discover the controller and gain in-depth information on traffic usage. That is, the data transmitted via different wireless and wired network components and their signal strength. Authorized and unauthorized Wi-Fi connections detected by our access points will be listed out as SSIDs, and root devices. Detailed information on the health and availability of your access points and active lines across your network can be obtained. Exclusive WLC reports are also available. So let's take a look at how to add a wireless LAN controller in the product. So under discovery and under settings again, let's click on add wireless LAN controller. Excuse me. So let's enter the IP address. So let's select the model and we select the credential. So once you click on add device, the wireless LAN controller will be added to OpManager to be monitored. So let's take a look at how this looks in OpManager. Click on network and then click on wireless. And as you can clearly see, you have the device summary page. You have the number of devices associated, the networks, the rogue APIs, and the number of clients. So let's go back to the presentation. And let's move on to Cisco device discovery and IPMI. So now let's talk about Cisco Meraki. You can monitor Cisco Meraki controllers using OpManager and have a detailed analysis of it, including their availability, health, efficiency, and performance. You can also understand the workings of rogue SSIDs, client, and access point usage. You can also monitor Cisco Discover and monitor Cisco ACI devices, and you can monitor critical metrics such as APIC controller, fabric switches, endpoint groups, etc. As for Cisco UCS and IPMI, you can monitor critical metrics like networking, virtualization, and fan speed, temperature, etc. With that, we have completed the first part of the free training series. Now let's address a few hot questions which our panelists have forwarded us. What are the editions of OpManager available? The key is to choose the right edition that serves your network and server monitoring requirements. We have four editions: Standard, Professional, Enterprise, and OpManager MSP. The link to this page has been shared to you in the chat panel. The next question is, I wanted to upgrade the memory and multiple devices in my network. Should I manually update the changes for every device? No. Op Manager comes to your rescue here. There is a dedicated option called rediscovery, where you will rediscover the devices in your network that have been previously discovered. When you rediscover all the updated values, will get reflected in Op Manager and you don't have to update them manually. Also, I must say that any change in interface properties like speed, description will be updated automatically every 24 hours. So let's see how rediscovery works in the product. So let's under discovery, let's click on network discovery. And now we click on the rediscovery tab. Let's click on rediscover devices. So as you can see, you can rediscover devices based on groups, business views, manually, or through categories. So let's say I want to discover storage device, rediscover storage devices, and I want to manually select these devices. So once you select the credentials for these devices, you can either schedule the rediscovery to happen at a later date, or you can click Save to rediscover the devices immediately. So let's go back to the presentation. The next question is, after discovery, some devices get listed as unknown in the inventory. It might be because of any of the below reasons. The discovery credentials might be wrong, ports might be closed, your device might not match the device templates, or your discovered devices may not be reachable. Number four is I have my devices spread across multiple locations in my country. I wanted to know the health of the devices at a particular location. How do I achieve this? Yes, there is a group feature in Op Manager which allows you to group devices or interfaces together for organized network management. To check the health of the devices at, say, the New York branch office, let's go to the product. Let's click on settings. And under configuration this time, let's click on groups. Now, click on add to add a new group. And now let's say I want to group the devices from the branch office of my organization. So click on next. And now you can choose the devices manually or through certain criteria. So let's select devices. So if you click on criteria, you can select the devices through this method, or you can select devices manually. So I want to group these devices together. So let's click on next. So let's select all and click on save. And now you've successfully added a group of your branch devices. So let's move on to the next question. And now this is a very interesting question. Does Op Manager have an agent-based monitoring system? Now, I know that previously in the presentation, it was mentioned that Op Manager is an agentless monitoring system, and that is certainly true. Op Manager does not require the use of an agent to monitor the device metrics. But just to cover all bases, Op Manager does provide an option to add an agent to monitor devices. Installation is quite simple. Simply download the exe file and install it in the device that has to be monitored. So let's see how to do that in the product. So let's click on settings, and under discovery, click on deploy agent. So all you have to do is download the exe file to manually install the agent in the desired device. Once again, I thank you all for patiently listening. I hope to see you all in the forthcoming season sessions as well. Thank you.